Good evening and welcome to the school committee meeting of March 4th, 2020. Just to remind everyone here, this meeting is being broadcast live. It is also being recorded for use at another date if needed, so please keep that in mind. I'd ask you to please join me in a moment of silence. Also, would you please join me in the salute to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. Tonight's meeting is to talk about unfinished business known as the budget. It's going to be a budget discussion and a budget discussion only. So, I will turn it over to the superintendent. He's going to present, and we're going to go line by line if needed.
Thanks, Bob. So today, at the request of folks in the public and folks in the committee, we'd like to go line by line if we need to, answer questions as we go forward, and then come up with a budget figure potentially that we could look to vote on at either this meeting or next week's. Next week's, I believe, Michelle, we have to send an assessment to both towns, May 11th. So I've asked the principals to be here today as well, if there are questions specific to their line items. John, I don't know if you want to talk about how we rolled over the budget this year?
Sure. The draft budget that you have is based on the required budget that the superintendent presented back on February 5th. The budget is organized by school and shows the proposed budget for FY21 next year. It shows the current year budget and 2 years of actual expenditures, 18 and 19. The information that you see came from the accounting system. As I mentioned last week, as you review it, you'll see some lines that show nothing but zeros. That's just because the accounting system has some lines that either we're not using or were used for a different purpose. I kept them in there just to keep the integrity of where the information came from. And there are a few accounts I'd just like to make a couple of comments on before we go any further. The salaries that you see in those budget lines are for the most part what we are obligated to pay next year. Whenever we had a vacancy that we know about for next year and we're going to fill that position, we've made an allowance for that replacement. Some of the budget numbers are based on estimates, such as the insurance account and utility accounts. The utility accounts are based on what the electric or gas, the actual commodity, will cost, an estimate of what we're going to see for a price increase for supply, distribution, and transmission. And finally, it uses for heating, what we think of as a normal winter, not the abnormally warm winter we've had this year and the year before. And for obvious reasons, the water account has been increased as well. In many cases, we just rolled over the current budget and carried that forward into next year. In doing that, we recognize that some accounts traditionally will have deficits. When you look at, for instance, substitute accounts, substitute teachers, that is always the line item that I nominate for being wrong. Throughout all of this, we're fully responsive to who gets sick and who doesn't come to work that day. And yes, we need to have a teacher. We can't run shorthanded. Out of all the schools last year, only Hanson Middle had a surplus in that account. Every other one had a deficit. So in rolling things forward, we also recognize there are some line items that may be overfunded, and we're hoping the two even out at the end of the year. Over the past few years, we have been spending down E&D, as you know, and have not been generating operating surpluses at the end of the year. So that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions for John?
Fred?
One question on the utilities, and you may or may not know it on the supply end. I know we were in a contract.
Yes.
I'm not sure when that contract expires.
The existing contracts that we have now run through next year, I know. Okay. There is a line, there's a timeline for when they expire. One of the, I think it was the gas contract last year, there was a problem with the supplier, and as a result, we had to make some changes in a hurry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's, is it 9.9 cents?
I don't, I'll have to get that for you.
I'm pretty sure that's,
I don't remember what it is per decatherm. But,
Okay,
well, I was talking on the kilowatt hour.
or kilowatt hour.
Yes, on that supply, and electric, so.
Okay, so,
Can I ask a quick question before we, Bob?
Chris, I'm
Really
sorry.
quick, is the handout that we received tonight the same handout we received a week ago?
Yeah.
Anything-
Yes.
Okay, good.
Except we changed the headers so
So
you
we-
can see the school at the top.
Great, so if we marked it up, we
Yes.
can go off the.
I
way
still
you-
got last week.
Perfect, thank you.
one of the things too, as you go through the lines, please take into account that we supply or we have supplemented staff through grant funding. Grant funding has been being cut across the board. In fact, Title I was restructured and poverty was shifted. And some of our teachers are paid for out of grants, and we've had to put them into salary lines. And last year, as we manipulated the budget to fit, even though we lost positions by gaining counselors, we had to shuffle people. So some folks moved from Indian Head, some folks moved from Hanson Middle, some folks moved over to Duval, okay? The other piece, once we get to the high school, our school choice expenses are greater than they were in the past. We've budgeted in FY '21 $225,000 for school choice. Back in 2014, we were expending $25,000. So when we brought choice in and we bring in revenues of close to $350,000, those teachers, if we want to keep them, are now in the line item for staff. We're not making as much money in school choice or our revenues are the same, but our expenditures are more. Same thing with charter schools. Our charter school expenses are more than they have been in the past. And if we want to keep teachers, you will notice an increase in line items in staffing. So if there are no more questions, I'm going to ask, we're just going to go building by building, if that's okay? So Gary, if you don't mind coming up, or just, if anybody has any specific questions for Gary?
I do have,
No?
I have a quick question, if you don't mind. I was looking at Indian Head special ed teacher salary.
Yep.
Can you, what's up with that swing?
So,
Is that one
so
of the
that's what we're
ones-
going to do right now. We're going to go building by building, okay? And I have an explanation for that.
I figured you would.
If we go from there. Good. So any specific questions? So we can answer that question on the Indian Head sped salary. In 2020, we had $385,800 and $5,000 in special ed. We've broken that down. If you'll see down below, 2 lines below that, Indian Head speech salary in 2021 is now $175,439. We have, that was one of the pieces. We've added a speech teacher. One of the teachers from Indian Head that was in that budget in 2020 is now a Hanson Middle School special education teacher. That was a salary of a teacher that retired, a speech teacher that retired as well. So that's why you notice that dip in salary. It's another move across the district. We did have a retirement. We added another speech teacher as well. And
You also had a maternity where you were paying
Right.
2 teachers. Yeah,
So-
yeah, so.
so those are the other pieces in here, is when we end up paying 2 salaries for staff during the course of the year, for maternity or for a long term. We do have a teacher, when we get to Duval, we do have a teacher that's out on paid admin leave right now, so I'm paying 2 salaries for that. And I still have to budget for next year because I don't know what's going to happen from that piece. So any other specifics for Gary as we progress? He's itching to speak.
So the elementary teacher.
Go on.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
No, no, sorry.
Go ahead.
No.
I was going to say the elementary teacher salary line shows a percent of 6.7% increase.
Are you talking about the $2 million one?
Third
Yeah,
one.
the third one
Yes.
down.
Yes, from the 2020 budget of 2.3 million, it goes to 2,461,000.
I believe those are general salary increases?
So
We're
you
not
have a-
adding any staff at this point?
So we have a general salary increase, our regular COLA salary increase, that also includes steps and lane changes, and also, and also a teacher, as I mentioned before, coming out of Title I or grant funding, that we have to shift into the teacher line, or the general salary budget.
The way it works every year for both, all of our salaries is, for example, Title I, we change, or I don't say we, I changed since I gotten here. I get the amount that we receive from Title I that funds certain teachers. I then look to see what teachers we had last year that was that, what is the amount that it's in, and then I would shift to get as many people as I can paid out of a grant or not, depending. For example, there are teachers at one elementary school that used to traditionally always be paid out of that grant. However, due to the price that that person, the salary that person earns, and then the amount of money that came in, the formula of Title I no longer worked for the schools we had to have it at, so you need to shift these things. The same thing happens with our special ed grants. So our special ed grants, we hire a lot of people, we pay a lot of people through, but depending on who those people are, we try to find the least expensive people we can to put under the grant to be funded so that we can reduce our salary lines and or increase. So if we slide a big ticket back to the salary line, because I can get maybe 2 teachers from somewhere else in the district onto it, there'll be a fluctuation in that salary line.
Also for the 2021, there is one teacher swing. A kindergarten teacher was taken on revolving in 2020, and that's added to the district budget. A senior teacher, high step, had moved from Conley. That was a revolving budget last year to make the budget work, is now a salary teacher.
It's a reclassification due to grants and
Mike?
revolving accounts.
Yep.
Moving people.
Where would I see the breakdown of principals and vice principal? What would that be under?
So your principal salaries are under district-wide principals. Your assistant principals are in,
Is that in here?
it's under district-wide principals.
4 of
yes.
7.
For the sake of maybe making this a little bit easier to move down through the line so we're not jumping all over from page to page, if we do it very similar to how town meeting goes, if I just read them out, principal supplies, if nobody has a question, we're gonna move on.
Sure.
And that way, we can run down the page instead of jumping from school to where they went. And then if somebody wants to hold it and discuss it, you can figure out what it is.
It's online,
It's online.
Sean. Yeah, it's
Yeah, it's the one
online.
that was passed out last week. It was online on the Thursday.
So it's right under budget.
These guys
Does
brought
that work for everybody?
No, you have to share.
Budget cuts.
Dawn?
So I just want to follow up back to the salaries. So, Mr. Farrell, as you were saying, Title I is allowing you to add 1 teaching position?
Title I changes per year. So for example, Title I and special ed change per year the amount of people that get paid out of it. Under Title I, there are no Title I effects that happen at Indian Head, but they happen at other elementaries. But what happens with some of these is that if I move a person who made too much money, I have to move them back into the salary line. I then get to put less senior people into a salary line. It is confusing, but that's the way we do it.
There's a lot of our teachers are paid from grants, and when the grant shrinks or the grant expands, you have to move them because you still need the staff. So you have to find a place to put them.
Maybe I should rephrase my question. Are you adding a teacher to the staff at this 154?
There are no additional staff members added in this,
Yeah.
and maybe I could preface that. There is a need for additional staffing because we have some class size issues at Indian Head and Duval. Those staffing, and actually at the high school, especially in science, to even out class size. Those 4 are in the recommended section of the budget as well. If we want to move those staff over. But as George just said, the staffing lines are the most difficult lines, especially when you cut grants and you want to keep. I have a teacher who's been here 45 years, and he used to get paid under Title I. He's at the top step of our contract. We can't afford him under Title I, so we have to move his line item to a salary line. So you might see a $90,000 increase or a $100,000 increase here. He didn't move. We just had to take 50 or 45 or whatever and move it to the grant to make sure that it works out, because grants have been dissipating over time. But in this budget, we're not adding any teaching staff. We are looking at just technology ads and curriculum ads. But Bob, if you want to just go line by line, and when we can go through it, and Gary can sit down.
Okay, principal supplies. Okay, principal travel, zeros are easy. Elementary teachers' salaries, everybody clear with that? Elementary para salaries. Elementary instructional materials. Elementary general supplies. STEM materials. Photocopier supplies. Sub-salaries.
So see, in that line there, but if you look at 19 actual, that's what we spent on subs, okay? And in 20, we budgeted. We're going to go over that again. We have to make sure we have money somewhere in there, as John was pertaining to. That sub-line can go over very quickly.
Tech service supplies, zero. Clinic supplies. Actual salaries.
Co-curricular, yeah.
Those are co-curricular, those are your after-school program salaries for people.
Adjustment counselor.
Oh, yeah. I thought he raised his hand, sorry. I thought Dan raised his hand.
Yeah, oh. Library materials. Library salaries. Library para salaries. Psych service salaries. If I don't see you, don't forget to speak up. SPED teacher salaries.
That was just moved.
Yes.
Yeah.
SPED, excuse me, I'm sorry, SPED para salaries. SPED speech salaries.
Hold.
Yeah, I have a question on that.
Okay, go ahead. You got a question, Fred?
Yep.
What is it? We're gonna do it right now.
We're showing 40% used, 40.3%, so it's showing available 102,000. Does that look like that will be a surplus?
For speech, potentially. Lauren can answer.
Lauren, come on up.
Sit down, Gary. Gary, you're done.
You're done, Gary, you're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we've had a lot of professional staff that we've had to cover this year that have been very difficult, maternity leaves, illnesses, last-minute people that didn't start this year. Speech is one of them, and school psych is one. Later, we're going to be talking about doing line item transfers, so there is money sitting in the salary line because we couldn't find someone to take the leave. So my contracted services is paying for using companies to get speech therapists in, to get school psychs in. So at the end of the year, when we balance out, you're going to see that my contracted services has gone over, and we have some salary money in those people's salary lines that we're going to have to transfer.
Does that make
Good.
sense? One of the things is speech and school psych have been challenging. There are no school psychs out there available to hire. And we had an opening, and you're going to see that at Whitman Middle School. But speech therapy is on the increase, especially at the elementary levels. And having people in to service them, there's just no candidates out there. So if people are listening, you want your kids to get a job, go into speech and language therapy in schools. It's a tough gig, but you'll get a job. There's no one out there.
And if I could...
Satisfied, Fred?
Yeah, I just got excited when I saw.
Could I just add one other thing? As we look at salary line items and some other items in the budget, Whitman-Hanson, like almost every school in the state, gives teachers the opportunity to get paid in 21 paychecks or 26 paychecks. But because of the fiscal year that we run into on June 30th, it means that at the very end of the school year, we run 5 payrolls. 5 payrolls hold the checks and dole them out every 2 weeks. And I say that because that means there are some things like salary line items and health insurance where there's a big expense in the very end of the year, and so it's not an even spend rate.
Thank you.
Everybody good? SPED other salaries.
Zero.
Okay, Conley School. How are you? Speech other. Principal supplies. Principal travel. Elementary teacher's salary.
Question.
Dawn?
Can
Can you just clarify, 213,000 increase to teacher salary?
That's again one of those grant items where a Title I teacher might have been paid through the Title I grant and is now going back into the LEA budget.
The person that Mr. Simonak referred to is that is the person that's there.
And we also have to remember lane changes and just COLAs. COLA's not crazy, but at some points, we can move people in steps and lanes, and they're relatively big jumps. There is no add to the staff here.
So would we see at some point in this budget a reciprocal sort of negative offsetting these adds to this line item?
I'm not sure.
I don't think you would see them in the grants.
Grant to take it
Right.
over.
Right.
Those will always go up as steps and lanes change. Or unless you get retirements from all those teachers and you get all new people.
Or if you're getting diminished grants, you're losing revenue, so
Right.
you have
Right.
to pick it up.
Backfill it.
Okay? Don? Okay? Elementary teacher salaries, okay? Elementary special salaries, 0. Elementary paras salaries,
Is that an addition, is that an additional para?
No, that's just, that is just raises. You saw that there was one, we spent less in 19. We spent more in 19, we spent less in 20. And then in 21, that's the expected amount that's there now with their raises.
everybody okay? Don?
Okay.
Elementary instructional materials, elementary general supplies, STEM materials, photocopier expense, sub-salaries, tech service supplies, clinic supplies, concurrent act supplies, salaries, Conley counselor. Remember, don't forget to speak up. Library supplies, other instructional materials, 0. Library salaries, 0. Conley Library para salaries.
Can I just interject too?
Yes.
As you go through line by line, if you notice what we spend for our libraries,
It's
okay?
atrocious.
So that's just a point to be taken. Those were all cut in years past. So as we go through this, understand that when you're talking library instructional supplies for Conley, that's $1,600 a year for new materials in their library. And we have a para in there.
So we would see that, and what line item would that be?
That was library.
No, where would we see that actual salary would be?
There is,
That
would,
We're paying someone to run the library.
Right,
Library
it's the
para
19824, Chris, the Conley Library para salary, or Mike, I'm sorry.
Everybody satisfied? Mike? Good? Psych service salaries. Sped teacher salary. Sped para salaries.
We shifted 4 paras over to Conley for support one-to-one and TLC. I think we shifted 2 and added 2 for our students this year. So that's the other piece that you're not going to see is we don't have a teachers, we have a choice sometimes to add. Special ed, we don't necessarily have a choice. So if a student needs a one-to-one, it's an add-on, and then two salaries came from Indian Head for one-to-ones.
And we're gonna have to find some money in that line anyways?
Yes.
That's running a
And
$16,000.
that becomes our issue, and that's Lauren's problem usually, that she's coming to say, we need to do some line items from other places to cover some of the either contracted services that we have for our students or for special education IEPs that come in to fruition, or when kids are not currently being serviced on the current IEP and we have to make a shift. And those are on the fly.
Everybody, Don?
Is that projected for next year that those are going to be shifted, or have they been shifted already this year?
Those are in now,
Okay, that you know.
that they're
gonna
now.
stay.
That's why we're under already in that budget.
Yeah, it's
Budget line.
$16,233.96 deficit as of.
That's in March.
March 2nd.
Yeah. So we're already in a deficit because of moves or ads.
Okay.
Okay. Speech salaries. sped other salaries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Okay. Next up, Duval Elementary, principal supplies.
Darlene's coming up.
Principal supplies. Principal travel. Elementary teachers' salaries.
Can we just confirm?
So,
So $130,000 reduction is not the loss of a teacher. Just want to clarify.
There was
There
a
was a
loss,
loss
but
of
there
a
was a cut last year.
In Duval.
There was a cut.
But the projection from what there is right now to next year, are we cutting another teacher?
No, no.
That's what I'm looking
no.
at.
Staying the same.
Staying the same. Remember, last year, when you're looking at the 2020 budget in that column,
Yeah.
you're looking at what we, what we presented last year before the cuts that were needed to be paid. So now, when you project this year, that's the result of
That cut.
the cut that took place by the end of the budget process last year.
So Duval does reflect that cut.
Yes.
Even though the other Conley and Indian had a teacher cut too, but
But we had to reflect, because we had to restructure them based on the restructuring that we did.
And although we did lose a 1 through 5, we added a K. So I have a third section of K, which I didn't have the year before, so.
If I could call the attention out to the line below that, that says Duval Elementary para salary, and then if I could ask you to look down the end of that Duval column, 3 from the bottom, where it says Duval sped para salary, you'll see some big fluctuations in those 2 lines. And the reason being is that Duval, with the closing of McQuon, Duval received specialized special ed programs at their building. We tried to do some reclassification of the paraprofessionals, and I don't know if we did a good job, but the thought process was this. There were, before the specialized special ed programs came to the Duval School had paraprofessionals that worked with some special ed students within the regular classroom, and also were paraprofessionals for kindergarten and instruction, not special ed. When we brought over the programs from the McQuon over, there were a number of paraprofessionals that came with those specialized programs. So what we tried to do was reclassify then the paraprofessionals and the sped paraprofessionals. We basically said, if you're in a program with a teacher and a specific set of kids in a specialized program, we're now going to label those special ed paras. And then we changed everything else to a regular para. So when you see those fluctuate, and there were also additions and subtractions based on student needs, but that's pretty much the fluctuation in line 4, and then in line 3 from the bottom up. Because they go together, if you can think about it that way.
You add both those columns up for 2021 and 2019, those numbers are pretty close. So even though it looks like there's big swings.
it's just shifting it from one
Yeah.
category.
Exactly.
Right, and then how do we figure it out? Because we were taking people and saying, no, that's sort of like a special ed para, but they're in the regular ed classroom. But that one's a really special ed para because she's in a classroom where the kids don't leave the room. So we had to sort of figure something out and make a determination on classification.
And we have to understand again, and we've talked about full-day K for years. Our teachers' salaries increase every year. We don't increase the cost of full-day K. So teacher salaries, a 20-person or a 21-person full-day classroom doesn't necessarily sustain this teacher's salary. So we have to dig in. The revolving piece will be supplemented by the district piece, and a lot of times that's the para salary. That's a para salary. So if I just look at an average teacher making between $65,000 and $70,000 a year, if I have 19 kids in a full-day class, because that's what we should be doing for the child, and we have 19 people paying for it, that's not going to cover that salary of the paras in the classroom and the teacher. The other thing that we're running into is we have more students that need full-day programming, and we don't offer a full-day, we offer a full-day program for certain students on IEPs, which means they'll be there the whole day, and they're in a half-day K program, but we need people to supplement and be with those students on the other part of the day, making sure they have services and they're not walking the buildings by themselves. That's where those paras come into play. I know we're going to beat the drum, but as we progress into the next couple fiscal years, we really need to take a hard look at making sure we have an adequate budget to put in a program for all of our students that can attend a full-day kindergarten at their home school. The revolving is not making, it's not equal anymore. And that's when we took a K teacher out of revolving for last year for budget purposes. That teacher is now in the LEA budget. And that's the issue we have. We have teachers that are great teachers and they've been here 25 or 30 years. They're not making $52,000. And if I bring in $70,000 in tuition, there's 32 or 80, or not 80, but there's $25,000 that we have to supplement somewhere along the line. And that includes a para at $21,000 as well, or a para and a half. So that's why you're seeing some fluctuations in those lines too. Our revolving accounts, as I mentioned, with choice are down. Our revolving accounts, there used to be, the previous business manager said years ago, there used to be a little bit more money in the kindergarten revolving account. That is drained pretty well right now.
Okay. So Duval Elementary Para, we're good?
Yep.
Elementary instructional materials. Elementary general supplies. STEM materials. Photocopier expenses. Sub-salary.
Now, I'll bring you to 19 actual for subs. That money has to come from somewhere as well. So if you look at average sub salaries as where they go, we do have teachers out on maternity, both maternity and paternity. Now it's family leave, and we have had some illness over there, so.
Bob?
Chris?
So how much, is there any type of offset between the sub versus actual full-time salary? Are you seeing reductions in the salary line because folks are out, or not necessarily because they're still on some sort of paid leave? Or a little both?
It depends. So if I have a 12-week maternity,
right,
that's different than a an FMLA, right, where teachers can also go to the bank. So it becomes very challenging.
Okay. So there may be an opportunity where we would be able to offset an unanticipated cost increase on the sub line with potentially some
absolutely
reduced salary costs. But to your point, we still have to be really careful because you don't know how much that sub line is going to hit.
Because if you get 2 long-term illnesses and you're gone, people think that the sick leave bank, there's just money there. It's not a floating account. It's just guaranteed. We don't have $2.5 million in sick leave bank somewhere in the treasury in the back. It's just budgeted in, but teachers have sick leave and they have the sick leave bank if need be. And that comes from somewhere. Some years are better than others, but that subline is challenging. And we used to have, speaking as the high school principal before, we used to have $100,000 in the subline. Sometimes that wasn't enough. And if you see the elementaries and they only have 26 or 27 staff members, that comes with teaching staff and para staff, and people are out, they get paid somewhere along the line. So that's why we're over.
Thank you.
Good. Tech services supplies, clinic supplies, concurrent actual salary, Duval counselor, library materials supplies, other instructional materials, library salaries, Duval library para salaries, psych service salaries, sped teacher salaries, sped para salaries, speech sped salaries, sped other salaries. Thank you. Whitman Middle, Mr. Grable. Whitman Middle principal supplies. Principal other expenses, principal travel, middle teacher's salary.
Question,
Whitman middle teacher salary, Dawn?
just to repeat. in case anyone sees this, $128,000 increase. Is that any increase to adding a teacher?
No. No increase to adding a teacher, no.
Okay.
Same staff, okay.
Whitman Middle instructional supplies. General supplies, Whitman
Actually,
Middle.
can I go back? I'm sorry, instructional supplies. I just wanted to look at 2019 actual is $2,139. That's for the entire school? Well, can you share what materials are purchased for $2,000?
Not a whole lot.
Right, or what we're not purchasing?
What we're not purchasing for,
Right, with I mean, I don't really mean, my point is more a comment at how little the instructional.
Correct, there's nothing.
Correct.
There's nothing.
right.
Yeah. That's where you usually have a PTO pack fundraiser. That's where you usually do have a spaghetti supper. That's where you usually do something else so you can get those supplies because we traditionally don't have them. We
Bingo night, tomorrow night, bingo night.
Bingo night,
Those are
Middle
your
School bingo
readers in your
night,
daughter's
we'll plug.
class.
Yeah.
That's the
5:45
fact
to
that we
8:30.
can't replace those. Okay.
Right, right. 600 kids, okay.
Okay. Whitman Middle general supplies. Photocopier expenses. Sub-salaries. Tech services supplies. Tech hardware. Clinic supplies. Concurrent actual salary. Guidance salary. Adjustment counselor salary. Library instruction material supplies. Library salary.
Yeah, Bob, on that one. So I just noticed that one was, and I can't remember if you touched on this, but so we went from actual around 40, budget around 50, to 2021 proposed budget of like 24.
Right. So what took place there was the Whitman Middle School used to have a full-time librarian until last year. That person transitioned out, and it now is in a different capacity. As a result, they have a paraprofessional now in the library. So that's what the paraprofessional makes, is that 23.9.
So shift from library to para.
Shift from library. And the rest of the librarian's salary was augmented at that point in time by Title IIA, a supplemental grant.
Okay.
Fred?
So just looking at, on the expenditure side, we still have the 50,803 available,
Okay.
technically.
So that.
And it
that
says
salary-
library para salary.
Right, that hasn't been moved.
Right, it hasn't been moved.
That hasn't been moved into tech instruction yet, which is where the librarian transferred into.
Okay. Fred? Okay.
Yes, yeah, fine.
Is there any discussion over reinstating a certified librarian? If that person was a certified librarian, now we have a para filling in?
At this point in time, no.
That's just that was from last year. That was a cut that we absorbed.
Okay, so it will, the budget is for a para librarian?
Yes.
Okay.
Before you get to the psych, the next line is the psych services line. We do have, so we had a resignation in September. You'll see that line item actually in district-wide psych. We just moved it because this is a contracted service position and also a long-term sub-counselor. So we have to break up that line. It's budgeted for next year in a different line item. We're hoping to have a full-time Whitman Middle School psychologist in September. Back. It's here, it's just somewhere else in the budget. So it's not like they don't have a psychologist budgeted for next year. It's the same salary line, it's just in a different place.
So that's the psych service salary line.
Yes.
Does everybody
Just didn't want
understand?
anybody to think we were cutting a psych. We didn't cut a psych. It's just in a different spot.
Everybody good? Sped teacher salary? Sped para salary? Sped other salaries? 0. Thank you. Hanson Middle.
Hanson Middle, Mr. Tranter could not be here, but we met with him.
You guys are going to do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bill's on his way to spring training. He's got the next couple days off.
Principal
Birthday present.
supplies? Principal other expense? Principal travel? Middle school teacher's salary, Hanson Middle.
Question?
Don?
Just to repeat, 136,000 increase, is that adding a staff?
We didn't add in teacher staff, but I will say that we added in sped staff down below. You'll see that down below. Okay, when we get to that, there were two ads down there.
If anyone's going to speak, that'll just come right to the podium. Wait till I ask you and tell us who you are and name and address, and you're up.
Okay, Kara Moser, 41 Hammond Road in Hanson. I just want to clarify for the Hanson Middle School teacher salary line item. I have fourth graders at Indian Head right now in class sizes of 28, which as a fourth grade teacher is not really in any way acceptable. I understand there was a cut of a position in fourth grade at Indian Head next year. I just want to confirm there are 5 sections of fifth grade at Hanson Middle next year. Is that the plan, to keep
As
5?
of right now, yes.
As of now, there are 5, and the
Okay.
hopeful plan is that there will be 5.
Okay, because, I mean, 28, I can't tell you, like, instructionally, from a child development standpoint, I know you know personally, George, like, that's,
Wife who's
yeah, I know, I'm sure you're living it every day. Like, it's just, it's really, I don't know how you teach 28 kids in a classroom. I really don't, so.
You're heard.
Yeah.
So far, and that's, we're
Yeah.
not looking at cutting that fifth grade right
Okay, so they'll be back to 5 sections as opposed to 4, is your
We're
plan?
hoping.
Yeah, as of right now, there are 5 sections at Hanson Middle.
Okay.
The charge,
Yeah.
that's what we proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Dawn?
Thank you, Kara. I think the concern would be also for those third graders moving up, or fourth, yes,
Yeah.
third graders moving up to that fourth grade.
It's about the same number that's tracking to go back into 4th grade.
And I think the issue was we started with class sizes that were already large of 25 and 26, and then we had multiple move-ins, and that just, it's so easy for that to happen. So it is really not instructionally sound, so thank you.
We're projected for
Thank you.
104 next year in fourth grade.
Yeah, so there'll be 26. Right now, there'll be 26 kids per 4th grade.
That's
Right now, there's 27 and 28. Before move-ins on the books right now, next year's 4th grade at Indian Head will be a minimum of 26 with the 4 sections.
Without any move-outs as well.
Correct.
Sure, correct.
Hanson Middle instructional material. Middle general supplies. Photocopier expense. Sub-salary. Tech services supplies. Clinic supplies. Concurrent actual salary. Guidance salaries. Adjustment counselor salaries. Library instructional material and supplies. Library salary.
I have a question. Or,
Dawn?
I just want to make mention this, what is the certification of this Hanson Middle School librarian?
Technology integration, which is not, we do not have any librarians. There's one librarian we have at the high school. The person who works in this position is a technology instructor. She's there. She also handles now, at this point in time, she also handles the city aspect, which is the SEL component that is complementary to what happens at Whitman Middle.
Okay, thank you.
Psych services salaries. Sped teacher salary.
So I can address that one. We added that language-based program. So we pulled a high school special education teacher and moved a Indian Head salary line of a sped teacher over to that. So it's 2 teachers in the language-based program at Hanson Middle. That, again, we talked about last year to make sure that we didn't have kids going out. So this increase in the salary is 2 teachers.
But they're already,
Everyone okay?
They're already teachers. We just moved money around.
Sped para salaries.
the result of that going down is that one of the teachers in that language-based program was the paraprofessional last year. So when the certifications were finished, the person was certified, the person was hired to take that position, and thus we absorbed the paraprofessional that he was. They were, I should say.
Sped speech salaries. Sped other. Whitman-Hanson Regional High School. Mr. Jones. Principal supplies. Principal other expense. Principal travel.
Question?
Fred?
Exactly what does that comprise?
The principal travel?
Yep.
That comprises of traveling to different events, sporting events, club events, things like that.
That's 5,000, how many miles?
It's about, instead of keeping track of the miles, that was a stipend that was put into the contract. That's,
It's contractual. It's contractual. So every principal has something in their contract for travel. Prior to 2014, we were doing mileage, and then the former superintendent started with putting mileage or travel stipends into principals' contracts, and we've continued that process.
I think it also should be noted that not necessarily in other schools at least, principals' travel when used does not necessarily have to be the principal themselves. It's the ability for the principal to assign reimbursement for travel. So I'll use my case as an example. When I was the principal, if it was $500, but I had somebody go to a professional development, that was in Franklin, let's say, I had the ability, should I have chosen, or if I usually only did it when they asked, I would have the ability to reimburse them at their mileage. So it doesn't necessarily, in all schools, have to be specific.
Large disparity between what the elementary teachers, middle school, elementary principals, middle school principal, and then jump up to high school.
I think a lot of that also pertains to the enormity of the events and the amount that people travel, not only from professional development, but like Chris said, the ability to have to show up to games, to supervise, to do whatever.
Okay? Thank you. Teacher's salary?
So just as for this isn't just ads. So last year when we modified our curriculum directors, curriculum directors used to be their own line item, and they still are. But now they get paid, part of their salary is .6 teaching, which added 4 .6 teachers to this staff. So we shifted money again, and they get .4 out of the curriculum director's salary. That curriculum director salary, which we're going to fast forward, also includes our elementary curriculum director that we added in the district budget, or we restructured finances last year in the district budget to add that person. So this teacher salary line doesn't add any teachers, but it shifts how we pay the curriculum directors. They were all in one line item last year.
Everybody set? Para's salary, instructional materials, general supplies, 21st century support.
Question. Is that under the grant?
They used to be under the grant.
Now this is where we had to make up for it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In order to receive the grant, the rules were we had to assume the salary so that the money for the grant to run the program still comes.
I know one time we had an extension.
Remember, everything was covered, and part of, after 5 years, it was the school has to support the salary of that to continue on with the grant. So we did.
No, just to point out that, yes, the grants are good, but then you have to
absorb them.
It's a placeholder. People
Correct.
don't get that's where you're getting your teacher from. 4 or 5 years of freeness, and then you have
Right,
to pay.
and the service provided is very good. However, we did have to absorb that, and that person isn't part of the teaching staff. This is outside of that.
Yep.
Okay? Dan?
All set. Thank you.
Other expenses?
Question.
Dawn?
Can you share what's funded?
Sure, there's multiple things funded.
Sure, there's other expenses, that's not broken into the various line items for different supplies, for different departments, things like that, but things that we're looking at are a lot of times the bigger expense items that fall outside of your supplies and material lines. So our Edgenuity program is funded through that. Our community evening school is funded through that. You get transportation costs funded through that.
So just a simple cost for Ingenuity, it's $20,000 or $21,000 a year for our online learning program that we worked. It used to be high school specific, but we worked a really good deal with the vendor to have courses available for all schools and unlimited licenses at the high school. So if a student is out, instead of tutoring sometimes, or if a student needs an additional class that can't fit in their schedule, it's rare, but we have a site license that they could take a class outside of the regular school day. The other piece that Chris mentions is we run a community evening school program, and for those of you 5, 6, 7 years ago, we used to charge students to come to school here at night. We got rid of that, and that was absorbed through part of Chris's or part of that other expenses line item and through some special education, okay, to keep kids here coming to school at night. This year's graduating class, I think, is 12 or 13. We all see that graduation. They have teachers. Those salaries are outside the district budget. It comes through this other expenses line. One of the things that we'd like to do as we transition business managers, is look at different accounting. That community evening school piece, I always thought should be a central office expense, because it doesn't necessarily deal with high school, and the ingenuity piece should come out of a district-wide expense instead of this, because that number of other expenses is kind of, wow, why do they have $80,000 in other expenses? What do they do? But that's for, we all want the band to travel to the Memorial Day Parade, every parade, you want the band to travel, that's a $1,000 expense easy. When the 8th graders used to come up to the high school for those days, that's an added expense. That's where those other expense amounts come from. That used to be over $100,000, and that's been chipped away over time.
We also pay our NEASC dues out of that, things like that.
What is, I'm sorry,
So-
repeat that, NEAS?
NEASC, the New England Accreditation of Schools and Colleges. It's our accreditation, the body that accredits the high school.
So out of that expense line also, so NEASC is close to $5,000 a year just to be a part of it. That comes, NHS has membership dues. All those things come out. If the music department has a membership, the honor societies have a membership, that comes out of that other expenses line.
Okay. Graduation expense. Equipment maintenance. Photocopier expense. Sub-salary. Tech services supplies. Technology hardware. Athletic salary.
Yeah, Bob. So on that one, we seem to have been running around 360,000 in 2019 and 18 actuals, and then we budgeted 393, and we're again budgeting 393. Is there room in that line, or what? We seem to be running around 360 and budgeting around 393.
I'm sorry,
So we seem to be budgeting around 360,000, and we seem to be running around. I'm sorry, we seem to be spending around 360,000,
Right.
budgeting around 393. So is there
Yeah,
excess budget?
I'll defer to
opportunity
Chris
there?
on that one, I'm not really.
Sure, sometimes what you find is we budget for the positions to be filled, but if we have numbers issues or if we don't fill a coaching position or things like that, that's where you'll see that extra amount budgeted for that's not filled.
Okay.
Dr. Jones?
Okay?
And this salary line is majority of the coaching positions, right? Just to explain.
Correct.
And the
Athletic director.
The
and the
athletic
coach.
director's in there, the coaching positions, all that.
Of all the teams, yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, wasn't there an increase in the coaching
Stipends.
stipend?
They get COLA and different things there. And we'll do it again with the association, is look at the area coaching salaries, and they will all get bumps. And it's not just one coach anymore. We have a varsity, a sub-varsity, and usually a freshman, sometimes two. We had two B teams, or an A and a B team for freshman basketball this year. Wanted them to have that experience, so we hired another coach instead of cutting those students. But there is a COLA bump too, and a step bump in coaching. We've done a nice job in leveling those out, and our coaching salaries are pretty equitable around the area. We're right in the middle.
Anyone else? Athletic supplies. Athletic travel. Athletic equipment maintenance.
Question. So just a comment as a whole in regards to user fees too. I know Mr. Rogers had come and spoke to them. So just for the public who may be watching, that these line items in the operating budget are separate from user fees, which cover other costs associated with athletics.
Correct. Looking at what's actually in the line item budget for athletics versus user fees, there's a minimal hit to the budget comparatively. I know they're big numbers, but compared to other programs that have them in the budget lines for the high school. Our athletic department does a great job with the user fees that Mr. Rogers came and explained to everybody.
And if I can highlight that too, because people always talk athletics, this includes no transportation, this includes no uniform. So when any athletic team you see with the brand new unis or the new sweats, it's all fundraised by their booster clubs. The equipment piece, we don't really supply any equipment. This is all restoration for football and for hockey, and what's mandated to restore. Boosters, again, pick up bats, ball, we supply the bare minimum in that 8,000. So we have a pretty detailed or expensive athletic program. the district's only coming up with about $411,000 of that for our full program.
Everyone okay? Athletic equipment maintenance done. Other contracted services. Clinic supplies. Concurrent actual salaries. Guidance salary.
So I'll tell you, the shift in here was a adjustment counselor that went from choice, because we're short on choice, to making sure that that person has a salary. Okay? Again, when I mentioned before, we were looking at $365,000 in revenues in choice. We're budgeting 2.25 next year for expenditures, because that's what we're looking at now. We're under budget. We budgeted 150 for FY20. We're expecting 225 next year because we already have kids out. So we're going to be short in that line already. So we have to move people so that we can maintain that salary somewhere, and that's a counselor.
Why is choice short?
Because we have more kids going
leaving.
out. We have more kids going out.
Everyone okay? Guidance contract. Guidance supplies. Library salaries. Library supplies. Library salaries. Library other salaries. Psych service salaries. Sped teacher salary. Sped para salaries.
So can we go back to that sped teacher salary? Was that
Ellen?
just a movement in the,
Back to, you mean sped teacher
yeah,
salaries?
the sped teacher salaries, was that?
That was also, one of that was, Dr. Jones did some trading last year of paraprofessionals for a teacher. So we didn't necessarily, we didn't increase the budget, but we traded in, if you could use that term, we traded in pieces of special, paraprofessionals in special ed, combined them in order to get a salary. It's also with some of the budget cuts we had, we did some movement in out-of-district placement coordinator, and we had Ms. Matheson who came on board, we had her replacement, so there were pieces that went back into the salary lines.
Gotcha.
Alan, you good?
I'm good.
Everyone else? Sped para salary. Sped other salary. Thank you, Dr. Jones.
Thank you.
District-wide expenses. School committee clerical salary. School committee supplies. Fred?
Question? And, I mean, I don't want to sound like a jerk. I think I know what that is, but water being one of them, if I'm not mistaken. Is that where the water comes from for our meetings?
Yep.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, that's the line item.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something we could bring our own, or do without. I know I'd bring a bottle of water, or jug or whatever.
Okay. School committee other expense. Fred?
If you could give us a breakdown exactly on what that is, what we've expended. I know part of it's gonna be, you know, some of the conferences, the conference down the Cape. What else is encompassing in that? Is that lodging as well?
I would assume so. I mean, any reimbursements for you guys to go to MASC, to charting the course, anytime we have to bring somebody in for that, there's a cost. Our memberships for charting the course, I believe, or to be members of MASC. I haven't, I'll be honest, I haven't looked at your school committee line because I'm not school committee. So I don't know what you guys have spent, and we just allocate to make sure that you have an ability as volunteers, as elected volunteers, to get professionally trained by, and keep up with law and budget processes so that you can make informed decisions here. And that's what the MASC conferences do, both the fall conference in November and any other additional places. So I would assume that's for lodging and for food and reimbursements that you guys have.
John? Wait a minute,
I
Fred.
think that's probably mostly accurate. I'd probably say that the next line item downwards says travel is where we traditionally look to take mileage reimbursement and/or some of the registration fees or overnight fees. And other expenses would be dues for MASC as well as, as well as any courses that you might take, people who join who have to take charting the course, those kinds of things. We can get you detail, though. I just don't have it.
Perhaps not appropriate for tonight, but in the very near future, I'd love to see this committee bring up, maybe have some policies as far as travel and overnight stay, how far something is, instead of just automatically getting a hotel room and perhaps commuting back and forth, you know, depending upon where it is.
That's probably something for policy. I agree with that. Mr. Boyce?
And if we've been lax, now I understand, I'm always about networking and being in groups such as MASC and so forth, and those subscriptions, memberships, whatever, institutional memberships, as I'd call them at the JFK Library, $9,000, that's that line. The travel, though, I've been told no reimbursement on our travel to MASC and so forth, and that went back to the previous superintendent. It came back from her through Michelle to me. So I'm not sure, but then again, now we need to take a hold of our own budget. You know, this is almost like when I being on the finance committee, we're doing all this other work, but no one's thinking about, well, oh yeah, we're going to pay the recording secretary, we've got to get new minutes books and so forth. No one's thinking about that additional stuff. So we should really look at those and address those two things. And if there is some underlying something about no reimbursement for travel for school committee members, if there was something said at one point, let's be very clear about that.
Fred?
And I do know that there have been people that have been reimbursed for hotel stays, for travel, you know, an hour, hour and a half away, or down the Cape at the MASC conference. Myself, I've chosen to either commute, or if I get a hotel, I've paid for it out of my pocket. That was my own choice. I've never turned in a slip myself. But, you know, I just think that we need to do whatever we can do to economize, and you can't save $100,000 before you save $1. So.
John, is there any way to look up what the actual amount spent in the last 2 to 3 years by the school committee for any of those expenses?
I'll have to go back.
Could you maybe have that for the next meeting?
Well, you have 18 and 19.
You have 18 and 19
You have
right
the
there.
actual expenses, not a breakdown of how it was.
Well, how it was spent.
How it was spent.
You have the totals.
Okay.
One more thing,
District-
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Boyce.
I do enjoy the water, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
But I will bring my own if you need me to.
Yeah, sure.
School committee travel, I think we just covered that.
I have a question. So you're saying that we should be able to see where that $3,000 was spent? Like, we must have
Yeah,
receipts or
we would
something?
have that, yes.
We'll have the detail of what it was.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, that's not something I
No,
looked at.
I know, I just-
Tonight. I looked at
3,000 years, and then we're going for 5,000 this year.
Lot of
Just
water.
curious. Well, this is travel. And I don't see how that's getting spent. I'm curious.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, because I know I've never,
We'll get an actual for the next meeting, Chris.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay. Central office superintendent salary. Central office superintendent's clerical salary. Professional salary. Central office superintendent. Contractual, is that what it?
Contractor, yeah.
Is that
Super-
the,
Fred, go ahead.
is that the classes that we required? Okay.
Superintendent supplies. Superintendent other expenses.
What does that encompass?
That's other contractual, that's my travel in that, other contractual things. Conferences, I get an allotment for conferences, I get an allotment for travel.
Right, but your travel's right below that.
Yeah, that includes my travel and conferences and other things that are in my contract.
Fred, you okay?
Just,
I'll
I
give
mean,
you,
it's contractual.
I'll give you a
Contractual.
breakdown of my contract, but I'd have to, the travel piece, the conference piece, the registration of conference, that's in there.
There's also food for when you have meetings,
Right.
all of that.
Superintendent travel. Assistant superintendent salary. Assistant superintendent clerical salary. Superintendent's contractual.
Business,
No,
What, Josh?
business finance, yeah, I don't know what that is.
Business financial salary.
Can we get, going back one?
Yep, which one?
Business financial superintendent contract. I would assume that's something within the business manager's contract.
correct.
For $8,500. I'd just like to know what it is and.
I can get a breakdown for you on that, correct.
We've only expended 504 out of it.
Right,
On this
that's,
report right now.
right.
Next meeting.
I'd have to look at that. I'm really not sure what that is.
Business financial salary. Business financial clerical salary. Business financial supplies. Business financial other expenses. Business financial legal.
Real quick, is that legal for the district?
Yes,
Just, what is that name?
we're gonna be over that this year again.
Yep. Sure.
Business financial debt principal. Business financial debt interest. Yes. We're back to business financial debt principal.
Frank Lynham, Whitman, yes. Debt principal and debt interest, what does that represent?
Represents the debt, the principal is the principal for the high school debt service, and then some items for Hanson that had to do with a technology loan that was made a number of years ago.
But aren't they already assessed outside the assessment?
They are, this is the way it's been handled in years gone by. So this, that's part
That
of,
would be doubling the money, because you have a budget that we're assessed for, and then we're separately assessed for capital. So if you're counting it twice, it seems to me that would be a double assessment. Just curious about that.
we'll check and make sure we only charge you once.
Okay, next. Business financial debt interest. RAND's interest, BAN's interest, contingency teachers' salaries, teachers' learning salaries, teachers' learning other expenses.
That is all the professional development and what takes place for the teachers in the district.
Teachers' learning professional development salaries, teachers' learning course reimbursement.
That is the contractual agreement with the WHEA where teachers have the ability to be reimbursed at a certain amount for the classes they take as they move towards their masters, or they move toward their CAGs, or they move to their doctorate, or they seek pre-approval for classes such as SEI, which is Sheltered English Immersion for English language learners.
Teachers' support salary, instructional materials.
Is that math?
That's the math program.
Don?
I just wanted to
And that-
confirm that that was the math
And
program
that's
that we
the-
added,
That's the ELA program for this year.
and bumping it up to
Yes,
ELA.
correct.
Okay.
Principal salary.
That's an add because the preschool salary went down. We added the preschool principal to a principal, or the director to a principal line, okay? So that's where that went up, plus contractor, the COLA and contractual increases. We didn't add, we added a principal. We just moved the director to a principal role in preschool.
Because remember,
So it comes in.
we named the preschool. The preschool is now a separate name with DESE, so the preschool academy. As a result, they needed a principal. They had a director for years. That person is now the principal. You had to shift those those funds
So
from
you're
the
gonna see
different
it-
lines.
It wasn't an addition, it was a
It
title.
wasn't an additional, it was the
Further down.
reclassification of the person.
And you'll see a reduction in the salary line.
Everybody good?
Yep.
Principal clerical salaries. Professional salaries, curriculum directors.
Those are the .45 curriculum director, the 5.4 high school curriculum directors and the elementary curriculum director. That's that salary line.
ESL program teacher salaries. ELL tutor salary.
If you noticed, we had to add a tutor, FY '20 and '21, we did not. That's because of our growing ELL population.
Everybody good? ESL program instructional coordinator salary. Supplies and materials.
We've never had supplies and materials for our ELL population, so there's many things that go into helping students acquire English language. So we needed to make sure that we have a supply line to help our students.
And it's K to 12. So you're looking at supplies for K to 12. It's not just one book. It has to be their reading level.
Preschool academy professional salaries.
That's where you see that decrease of the principal, that went down and moved.
Preschool academy para salaries.
That line item went up because their revolving account is down. We are servicing more students, and we can't charge for the needs of those students. So we've had to move paras from revolving into LEA budget.
Everybody good? Preschool academy instructional materials. Preschool academy general supplies. Elementary family liaison salaries. Central office photocopiers. Photocopier business financial expense. Everybody still with me? Photocopy instructional service expense. Is that contracted with,
What's that, the contract?
photocopy instructional service expense, 152.
That's
Thousand?
the Smart Center.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. That's the Smart
That
Center.
saved us money. when
That's
we
our
did-
contract.
Right, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Instructional supply teachers' salaries, instructional supplies clerical salaries, instructional supplies sub-salaries, instructional support professional development and professional sub, instructional supply general supply, excuse me, general supplies, instructional supplies OIS,
That's our contracted service. That's
Yeah.
support services.
yeah. Instructional supplies and other expenses.
I have a question on that.
Instructional,
Yeah.
Yeah, what is that,
Ally?
what does that line item pertain to?
Yeah, it's right there.
We're backing up one.
Other expense, that's the one,
Yeah,
Ally?
that's the one.
Instructional supplies and other expenses.
Instructional supply, other expenses includes everything that we need to do that's not, so I can get you the detailed list of it, I know the number off the count of my head, but it's, that is everything that we do for, like, when we do our CPI training, when we do, when we pay our bills for things that groups of teachers need, that is not necessarily individually based. So I can get you the account breakdown of what that is. That's been in there for years, and I can easily get you that. Off the top of
Okay.
my head, I can.
Instructional support travel. Tuition other schools. School choice.
So if you see the budget that we have right now, we're projecting 215 for next year. We're going to be short in FY '20 already. 'Cause we're projecting $215,000 going out to choice next year.
Charter schools.
And if you see the actuals from 19 and what was budgeted for 20, our charter school is up as well for FY '21.
Other expense. Tech services info management salaries. Tech service management contract. Tech service info management supplies. Tech service technical professional salaries.
You'll see an increase there. That's increasing the budget that we talked about for tech services. That's also the remaining salary of the person who was formerly the librarian at the Whitman Middle School, the portion that was not covered by Title II.
Everybody okay?
And I'm sorry, and is this
Go on.
the salary that is recommended
yes.
to add that support back?
Yes, to add the support back to the technology department.
It's not management, it's support.
Technical service, technical contracts, tech equipment, tech service other salaries, OIS salary, tech service OIS travel.
What does that encompass?
Tech service OIS travel covers things that, where if we have to go out, if the people in tech have to go out to either service something, to meet with the vendors, and that also encompasses when the vendors have to come to us. Sometimes in the service contract, we have to pay salary. I mean, excuse me, we have to pay travel for the vendors to come out.
Tech services OIS travel.
Same. Well, no, okay, the tech service OIS travel is what I just explained. The one above it, which is tech services OIS salary, that's the students that work. We have a cachet of students that do all the events and that film and that run the board for the events. That's under the auspices of Jason Cook, who runs our audio. That's the salaries that pay them.
Tech service CIT
Contracted service.
contract services.
That basically keeps 20 years of technology running, and those are things that range everywhere from what we pay for Microsoft, what we pay for our servers, what we pay for everything that we have that needs to be serviced both by outside of our individual people who run it. So like contracted services.
Tech service equipment maintenance.
Same, keep the equipment running.
Tech service equipment supplies.
You will see that line went up because in converting with E-rate for the last 2 years, we had to, those lines some lines got collapsed because you noticed when we had individual school accounts, all those tech lines are now zeros. So we kind of combined it because we have centrally located technology.
Tech service contractual services and software, I believe, zero. Tech services BSS contractual services.
BSS is our controller system. The contracted services and the equipment and the replacement, those two BSSs are our doors, alarms, and all of the things for all of our schools from a security standpoint.
Tech services equipment maintenance. Replacement of equipment for tech services. Tech new equipment. Replacement equipment. Building improvements.
Actually, I'm sorry, Bob, can we just back up?
Yep, replacement equipment.
Yeah, replacement equipment. Would that be Chromebooks for classrooms or different?
Oh, no, God, no. This is just,
Right.
yeah, Chromebooks are basically at the whim of the great people who raise that money in the towns.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm
yeah.
that type of equipment wasn't related to. Okay.
Okay. Replacement equipment, that settled that. Building improvements. Salaries, ATHL, zero. ATHL employment insurance, employee insurance.
What does that encompass, that would be broken out separately?
That's a coach's insurance, I believe?
Yeah, I'm not sure why it's run separately, but that's what it is.
One of the things John has seen too, and as we go through these accounts, we'd like to building base some of these accounts again. A lot of these are district-wide and they should be building based. And we need to clean up some of these accounts that have zeros and have had zeros for multiple years. It makes it easier for you folks and people in town to see them. It's also confusing for us to see accounts that we haven't used in years.
When I look at district-wide employee insurance, the only reason why I think it might be separate is because middle schools now have competitive sports. So when you take teams out, they have competitive basketball, they have competitive track and field, they have competitive cross-country. That's what I'm assuming, because it would be separate from the high school sports.
One of the things we talked about is changing some of the district-wide accounts. So they have a clearer descriptor, so we would take all of the SPED accounts and put them together under SPED, take all of the preschool accounts and put them together under preschool, and it would look and feel a lot more like an individual school and easier to follow, rather than have so many things lumped together when they are really for a specialized group of people.
Transportation, other expense, district-wide clinical salaries.
Those are your nurses. Those are your nurses.
District-wide clinic supervision.
It's a stipend for the nurse leader, just if people want to know.
District-wide clinical other salaries.
That's the part-time float nurse for coverage.
Yes.
That's like their sub-line, but it's a nurse.
District-wide contracted services.
That goes to pay the physician that we have to have on staff, that the district has to have. We have to have a physician.
District-wide clinical supplies. District-wide clinical travel. District-wide guidance salaries. District-wide adjustment counselor salaries. District-wide guidance clerical salaries. District-wide EMP Ben salary reserve. What is that? Employee benefits?
Yes, those are our Unit A, Unit B employee benefits. When people retire and sick leave buyback. That's all encompassing that line item.
Employee benefits, yeah.
Correct.
District-wide employee benefits retirement. District-wide employee benefits Medicare tax. District-wide unemployment tax. District-wide employee health insurance.
Bob?
Chris?
So on that one, looks like we're assuming about a 4.48% increase from this year's budget to 2021.
We think overall it's gonna look like about a 4% increase. It's not just the salary increase, but it's for handling new employees. I mean, as we look back over the years, we seem to be, even though we're not necessarily adding staff, we seem to be adding insured people. So it's a little bit of both. When we go back and look at the last several years, last year was a $190,000 increase. The year before that, it was $320,000 increase. Now, the rate went up more, but again, we were still looking at adding lives.
More employees are taking the benefit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you know roughly how many employees are using our health insurance?
Off the top, no. Find that out for you though, Mike.
We can tell you how many cases we have. It's between, and of course, it's retirees as well as active employees.
You okay, Chris?
Yeah, thank you.
Insurance, library salaries, library's other salaries, other instructional materials, district-wide psych professional salaries.
So that's your Whitman Middle School psych. That's being paid out of Lauren's account here because we don't have a school psych at Whitman Middle right now. So that'll float back to Whitman Middle once we hire someone.
District-wide SPED curricular development salary, director's salary. District-wide SPED teacher salary.
Those are your BCBAs, your behavior technicians that service the whole district.
District-wide SPED tutor salary. District-wide SPED clerical salary. District-wide non-clerical para. District-wide SPED general supplies.
How come the large jump there?
Because we have found that we do not have enough supplies for special ed itself. So what was happening, we were robbing from other accounts, so we tried to increase that. That was reflective of the things that we had given you in previous meetings.
So we're currently 7,400 in the hole, and we're looking at probably another 8 grand.
Yeah,
Probably,
so that's
yeah.
why we're trying, that's why we earmarked 15,000 to hopefully keep it in line.
Good, Fred?
Yep.
ESY summer materials. District-wide sped OIS travel.
I gotta, could I get an explanation on that? Is that, it's not for students at all?
No.
No,
This is
that's-
professional staff travel, when they have to go to professional development, or Lauren has to travel to a collaborative, or our out-of-district coordinator has to travel to a site to visit. We have to reimburse them for travel.
How, and the reimbursement is per IRS guidelines?
So our director of special education has a contractual benefit, and our out-of-district coordinator does not, so we do mileage at this point.
District-wide sped OIS contractual services.
So you've seen an increase in that line. Those are Lauren's contracted services that she has to bring in for specific needs for kids. Those are all outside vendors that we have to bring in.
District-wide sped legal.
We're going to be short again. We're going to be short again. If you've seen in 19, this is our legal. We've been on the phone with legal a lot. We have more and more folks challenging some team decisions. So anytime we have to go to mediation, and Lauren was in mediation this week already, or to Boston to the Board of Special Education Appeals, we have counsel. It's well worth it, and it's good for both us as a district and for the students to make sure that they're represented well, and we're represented well.
District-wide sped transportation contractual services.
And that was a bump that we put in our required budget because we're already, transportation's over. We're hoping in the new Student Opportunities Act that we'll get some reimbursement from the state for transportation. The governor or the Student Opportunities Act looked like a 25% reimbursement to us, subject to appropriation. So we'll see. But we are always over in sped transportation. We've talked about that at length at meetings.
And that's supposed to escalate 25% a year until it reaches 100%.
Yeah, right.
Subject
So
to
we'll see.
appropriation.
I mean, I'm hoping that would be great if we got something back in transportation.
Still believe in Santa Claus.
Come on, Fred.
District-wide sped tuition to other schools.
You've noticed this is an increase over and over, as we are, and Lauren's projecting another, and we put that in the required part of our budget.
Yeah, and are we ever gonna bring stuff back in-house?
We're working on that. When I talked about the Hanson Middle School piece, we're looking at potentially, depending on how this budget works out, we're moving a program from Hanson Middle School, a special ed program, to the high school this year, because we
Trying to
want to
keep
make
those
sure
students
those students stay in district for their full experience and not go out because the high school doesn't have a program.
We need money to save.
Correct.
Chris?
Just for the folks watching, to clarify, so the 2018 actual spend was about $2.9 million, and the 2021 budget is $4.4 million. It's $1.5 million jump. So this is one of the things that really, we talked about it ad nauseam, but it's just worth pointing out again that this really hamstrings our budget process. There's nothing we can do about this. This big, large dollar increases year over year.
So our largest, I think, Lauren, out of district is a 3.25 residential, close to that. So if we have 2 in a year, you can have a $600,000 swing in out of districts.
Now, to Dan's point, hopefully we can, again,
Correct.
continue to talk
Some
about
of
how we
them,
do it, but for now, this is.
But those residential ones, that's not
Yes.
really gonna go away, so.
And that is for the student's best interest. Now, some of the other out of districts, we probably can bring back programming to adequately service a large number of our kids because we've cut in the past.
I think it's also important to note, though, when you have, even when you have an in-district special ed program, when that child reaches the point where then they're going to be integrated into the regular classroom setting with their accommodations, when you put them in a class already of 28, or 27 in first or second grade, it does sort of hamstring their success. So you have to make that determination. It's one thing to establish a special ed program in order to help bring students back, but it's also another thing where you have to look at a fairness doctrine that says, if part of that program is in the regular ed classroom, and that regular ed classroom already has 25, 26, 27 students, you have to measure it that way also.
Justin Evans, Whitman Selectman. This line is partially reimbursed as part of the circuit breaker.
Correct.
Where does that reimbursement end up? It's 1 year in arrears, but
right.
Where does that money go?
It goes to offset the cost of out-of-district placements, is the way it's been used here in the district. Specifically, when we do the assessments, it's counted as a revenue item.
Thanks.
And by the way, we are looking at, so this budget that we're proposing is offset by $450,000 in circuit breaker.
I just wanted to mention
Laura?
that the jump that I think we're seeing, and not just us as a district, but every time I get together with area special ed directors, we all talk about the same thing, and that is the social emotional health of our students. And I think we're seeing the jump because we have more and more students who have social emotional needs. We're seeing tons of anxiety, mental health issues that make it difficult for students to walk through our doors. So I'm always looking at how we can support these students here, because if we can't support them here and we have to educate them, they end up going out. So that's why you'll notice on the recommended, I'm a real big believer in our Bright program and what we did here at the high school to support students. And so that's one of the things on the recommended list, is bringing social emotional programs to the middle school, because the jumps in the tuition of kids that we're sending out are either social emotional kids or kids that are moving into the district that are already in out-of-district placements that we just become responsible for funding.
Chris?
So not for tonight, but another time, because I think there's some data that I was looking at on the South Coast that would echo what you said. At some point, can you give us some level of kind of the trending in terms of what you're seeing with that increase and where? Because this is going to have a strategic implication for the future.
It is.
I think I've heard from a number of others exactly what you just said.
Yep.
We're now seeing the effects as folks enter the workplace.
Yeah.
There's huge spikes in that as well.
Yes.
So this is something we're going to just have to prepare for years to come. So at some point, if you could,
I'd be
okay
happy
with the
to do
chair,
that.
we could maybe look at some of that trending data. That would be helpful.
And even the data of when you do put a program in school. So I have data on what our absenteeism looked like, what student dropout rates looked like, and out-of-district rates before we had our Bright program, and then what results because of that. So the data that shows that we can keep students in district and we can keep them attending school and keep them from dropping out if we can support them. So I'd be happy to bring that data. I love to talk about that because I believe in it very much. Thanks.
Open a vote on it? We're good.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Good? Everybody good? Transportation, summer ESY professional salaries, ESY para salaries, district-wide sped speech salaries, district liaison salaries, 0. District-wide OPS liaison expenses, district-wide OPS police details, district-wide crossing guard salaries, general supplies, district-wide transportation, other salaries, district-wide transportation contracted services.
It's our bus, the buses.
It's buses.
It's the big yellow bus.
District-wide transportation, McKinney-Vento.
It's the transportation of our homeless students.
Everybody hear that? And that's gone up. As you can see, it was at 40,019 it's going up to
Yeah,
70,000.
we're estimating, this might be, it might not come to fruition like that, but we're estimating that just on projections from our folks in sped.
Can we go back one to?
Which one, Fred?
Transportation, district-wide.
District-wide transportation, other,
Contract services.
contract services, yeah, that's where we're still
Does that
there.
include non-mandated busing, or is that just mandated?
That's our contract with the bus.
So that's
That's
all our
That's
busing. everything.
That's our buses.
That's everything. And then, of course, when we do the assessments, we subtract out the reimbursement we get for regular transportation, which is $888,000 this year, and then we also take out what we bill the town separately for non-mandated
Was it
transportation.
888, or was there's still a question whether or not some of that was from FY19 supplemental too, though?
We can have
Is
this
that on the cherry
conversation
sheet,
later.
or-
It's on the cherry sheet, $888,000, correct.
Dawn?
I just want to go back to the homeless transportation, if we can just explain.
McKinney
to people
Vento?
listening, why we transport homeless kids, because it is a law.
law.
It's the
Yes.
law.
So if a student went to school in our district and became homeless and was in a shelter outside of Whitman-Hanson, then it's the law that we need to transport them
Well-
back to their original school.
If I may, it's also somewhat more complicated than that. It can be somebody who is in a shelter, or somebody who, for instance, the house burns down, or it's no longer habitable and they need to be temporarily located somewhere else. It is people who live in our towns of Whitman and Hanson who become dislocated, or somebody who is in another town and winds up coming here because of where they were, they had to leave, and then we have to share that transportation cost with the sending town. So we can be both a sending and a receiving town and share the cost of transportation.
Good?
Thank you.
Building improvements. District-wide facilities overtime.
What does that encompass? Or what's considered to be overtime for facilities?
Any issue that takes place where that's over the normal cost.
Rooftop unit freezes on the
Yeah.
weekend.
Somebody comes in on the weekend, those kinds of things.
Guys come in at 4 o'clock to shovel, you know.
District-wide facilities maintenance salary.
A question, is that,
What, Dawn?
how many positions is that for salary?
The district-wide maintenance salary,
Yeah.
that would be one. That's,
No.
Oh,
am I wrong? Isn't
No,
that
that's
the
one.
target? Where are we? We're
There's
right
two lines that basically.
There are two lines.
oh, sorry.
This is the confusing.
I'm
So
sorry.
Right.
the first line is for an individual, and the second line is
For the group.
For all
Is the
our
group.
You're looking at.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
maintenance,
the maintenance staff.
Okay, I'm sorry, my copy.
okay? Dawn?
Yeah. But I have a question, though. Did we lose a position in facilities there last year?
We did, we lost a piece of it, but that was also through school use, because we no longer have school use that gets paid out of it, and that was also from a perspective of clerical.
So we used to supplement the salary with building use,
Okay.
part of it, but part of it, we did lose out of the district salary.
Okay. District-wide snow and inclement weather salary. District-wide snow and inclement weather.
That's snow removal, just stuff.
So what's the difference between if someone came in for overtime for snow removal?
So one
And
is
then
just
this
for,
line.
one is just for snow and ice. The rest is when you have a flood. The rest is when there's an issue with the
Okay.
building. The rest is not
This is
inclement
just
weather
snow,
related.
and I don't know if you know this, but unlike municipalities, anything and everything can be billable for snow removal. If Mr. LaMartine is driving a DPW truck for the town of Whitman in snow plowing and takes a bottle of water with him, that's all billable to the town. Just let you know. We don't have to do that.
We're not gonna provide any more water right now. We don't have to worry about that.
Randy, we don't take cash.
I'll tell you.
Thank you for moving the snow.
Hey, wait a second, I helped out plowing a couple of years ago at the middle school, I didn't charge.
Fred, you didn't turn a slip in.
I used my own truck.
District-wide facilities contractual services.
That's,
District-wide facilities contractual cleaning, that's the SJ Services?
Yes.
Correct.
It's the last year of the contract.
This is the last year?
This coming.
Okay.
This
yeah,
coming
I was
year
gonna
is
say,
the
I thought-
last year.
And same with the bus as well, correct?
Everything's up.
Yeah.
Everybody that has a contract is up next year.
Didn't we just do those?
District-wide facilities carpentry, 0. District-wide facilities supplies. District-wide facilities other expense.
The increase in that is for the loader. Remember, we bought the payment for the loader that we bought last year.
But we should have seen a saving somewhere else because we were paying for a loader,
We're paying for rental.
a rental. It offset.
I'd have to look
One
into
of the
that.
reasons for the increase has to do with the certifications that.
Yeah, we also put in,
That's $25,000 for certifications for our staff.
We talked about in our, there was an increase in professional salaries, certifications that people receive, the number of people that are in the staff, that deals with a burgeoning personnel issue.
Is that a one-time expense?
That would be.
it would be.
But the loader, if I'm not mistaken, was offset because we were paying for that out of another line as a rental. At least that's the way it was explained. It'd be great if we could just find out where that line went down.
Absolutely.
Okay. New equipment maintenance. District-wide facility building maintenance. District-wide facility equipment contractual service.
What contract is that?
Which one?
It was 83,000, now it's 120.
I have to check. I'm assuming a lot of that, I know some of that deals with all the maintenance contracts we have to deal with our fire boards, all of our alarm systems, and things of that nature. But again, I can break that down because Ernie has that for you.
The jump could be for the new board that we received for no cost, but it might have been a contract that went on with it.
Everybody good? District-wide facility emergency repairs. District-wide facilities fuel, oil, and gas. District-wide facilities truck lease. District-wide utilities contractual services. District-wide utilities contractual services electric. District-wide utilities contractual services telephone. District-wide utilities fuel, is that oil, gas, and water?
Oil, gas, and water. And the big,
Gotta
and
figure
the
that
increase is related to the increase in water for this
We
building.
have that same thing going on.
Yeah, okay.
Utilities, fuel, oil, gas, and water, right?
Correct.
0. District-wide utilities rubbish removal.
Can we go back to utilities, fuel, oil, gas, and water, that line item? I have that 0, 0. What is that? Is that, because we're down on the next, am I missing that, or?
Been reclassified.
Was that just changing it?
Classified
It
above.
was reclassified a couple years ago.
It's all that top?
So I'm going to make a guess here why it's done this way, and it has to do with the business reporting that we do to the state. And it used to be, it wasn't so long ago, that we had to report those as separate items, and then they said you could lump them all together. And so I suspect in an attempt to make life
So it's in the
simpler,
one above it?
Yeah, they put it into one. That's my guess.
Okay. District-wide rubbish removal. Replacement equipment. District-wide building insurance. That's in all the buildings?
It's for all the buildings, it's a property casualty and general liability insurance. We're actually underwater a little bit in that line item this year and expecting, as an allowance number, a significant increase. We're still dealing with the losses that went with the epic winter of 2015. I think once we get past that, you'll probably see we'll be rated somewhat differently.
Do we have plans to shop that?
this year, put it out to bid?
I think we're probably, I think my successor can look to shop it the year after. My suggestion is they look at a couple of places. Municipal insurance is somewhat a specialty.
Okay, Mr. Hayes, I wanted to wait until the committee finished with line items and bring up a proposal, or at least a request, that I mentioned at the last meeting, that you consider reinstating the 4 elementary school positions. A parent from Hanson spoke earlier about the class sizes at the 4th grade at the Indian Head. It also pertains to the Duval School. I did not include that in the handout that you kindly let me distribute at the meeting. So I'd like you to take a look at the Duval School 1st and 2nd grade class sizes for fiscal 2019-20, compared to Conley and Indian Head, which are at 19. Duval has a 1st grade class size average of 24. And a 2nd grade class size average at Duval and Indian Head, Conley and Indian Head. It's this handout that
Mr. Tanner gave that out.
Mr. Hayes kindly let me distribute it. Duval, again, is at 26.7. The other schools are smaller. If these same children who are in school this year just rise to the next grade, it persists. You have a class size of 25 in the 1st grade at Duval, 24 at the 1st grade, in the 2nd grade at Duval, significantly smaller class sizes. And had I included the 4th grade, you would see that the Duval and the Indian Head 4th grade class sizes are also 26, 27, 28 students. I would respectfully request that you take the $280,000 that is in the required, restored, and additional budget, and I know there's a language issue here with so many pieces of paper being passed around, but I think it's the 4 teachers for $280,000, and put that in the budget for your consideration. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you. You guys got that? Okay.
And we know it's there, yeah.
Sean Kane, Whitman. I have a question about the regional agreement. Is there an effort being made right now to put the regional agreement or placeholder for the regional agreement on both town warrants, Whitman and Hanson?
What?
Not on the agenda.
Nothing to do with
We're talking budget tonight, Sean. We're not talking about the regional agreement.
You separate the regional agreement from the budget.
We're going to get into the regional agreement piece, as we said and as we discussed at the last meeting. But we said tonight we're strictly going to go line by line and stay to the budget. We are going to get to the regional agreement. It'll be on the next committee meeting, and we'll discuss it at length if need be. But tonight, we're just strictly doing the line-by-line budget. This was an extra meeting if you, and I know you were at pretty sure, yeah, you were at last week's meeting. We put this on strictly to get to this. So as much as I'd like to hear it, it's not on there.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
That's all I have. I mean, it's, as I said before, at the beginning, I do see an issue with class size in science at the high school, at Duval at 2 areas, and at Indian Head. I do have an issue in technology right now. They're running ragged, and we need to support them because our infrastructure is failing. If we had a brand-new infrastructure, I might not need the support there. So what we presented was the required piece to the committee before. If the committee wants to add anything from recommended between tonight and next week, we'll work on what that assessment would be, but next week we're going to have to give a budget to the 2 communities with their assessment. We can move up and down from there, depending on what says Whitman, what says Hanson. But that's what I think as the superintendent, I do see a need for class size. We do have a class size issue. There's no question about that. And the building level principals have manipulated their teachers to put them in the places that they are right now. 1st and 2nd grade at Duval is an issue, and 4th grade at Indian Head is an issue. But again, here, what the committee gives to the towns and what the towns are able to afford, then we will go back and forth with if we have to add or subtract from the required budget that we presented.
Chris?
So, just to comment on what you just said, so we definitely have to get those indicative numbers to the town, those budget numbers, right?
Next week.
Yeah.
Right, Michelle? You told me that's my job?
So perhaps what we could do, because the woman that just spoke, I completely recognize what she just described. So in terms of class sizes and looking at that, I think that's...
You're going to get a budget and assessment next week.
That makes sense. But what I'm asking for is, could we do kind of could you maintain here's the assessment if we do the required, and here's kind of what we're hanging off to the side, because I think we are going to feel the pressures
absolutely.
of what is the absolute being cost conscientious this year. What does that look like, so that we can kind of have a sense of what that would translate to the towns, and then what are some of these other things that have spoken about.
We can give you.
So as long as we can kind of keep those together, then it keeps our options
But
open.
with an assessment to those numbers as well.
Yes.
Correct.
Please.
Fred?
Just looking at timing and looking at, where we sit, and while we have all sorts of numbers fresh in our head, and I'll probably just, instead of making a motion, perhaps ask the committee for their consensus beforehand. Would anybody be prepared to discuss the budget number and try and set a budget number this evening, so we can move forward? We can have further discussion if we find any cost-saving measures, and we can always bring our assessment down. But to set at least a base level that, we feel is a palatable number, so to speak.
Go ahead, Chris.
So I'd love to do that. I'm not sure about the revenue side. Right, so we're just talking about the expense side where we focused. I think that we could certainly look at, but I think we're still missing what does that total look like? And I'm not sure we're prepared to do that, right? We could certainly look at it from expense side.
Yeah, and, in other words, if we set a budget and, just for the sake of argument, we set the budget at the required amount. And we said, okay, this is what our budget is. If we set that as a budget, it can't go down. I'm sorry, it can go down, but it can't go up.
That's correct.
That's not good. No.
Well, for that matter, we could set the budget at the recommended.
Who's Jeff?
From what we've talked, and John enlightened us, we can move. We can fluctuate. That number that we assess, we always said, and this is what we learned in the past, is once we set an assessment, we can only go down because of that percentage rate. And bringing John into this, and maybe you can add to this, is they've been able to move both up and down as the school committee sets that budget. Is that correct?
Let me just say that I have seen many school committees that vote a budget, including regional school committees, where that then drives an assessment. They'll vote budget and come back and reconsider it at a different time, and then add or subtract to it. Both goes up and down. Now, the way the assessment method was before was somewhat complicated. And in terms of, you just had these individual bands, and it went up 1%, it was this number, and the statutory method is somewhat simpler and lends itself to that. Now, the fact that other people do it does not necessarily mean it's something you want to do, but
Did the committee, before we move forward, did you find going line by line beneficial?
Yes, this was very helpful.
I mean, it definitely took some time, but it gives everybody, including the general public, a better snapshot. I mean, when you're talking about just building insurance at $500,000.
yes.
So I just, for my own thought process, I just wanted to make sure that everybody thought it was beneficial, because I most certainly did. What's your pleasure? What would you like? What would you like to do? You want to set a budget now? Do you want to let the numbers set in for another week? We're going to be meeting on the 11th.
Next week from today.
Is that correct?
What?
Michelle? Okay. Dawn?
I have a comment. I just want to look back at the budget we just discussed, and being part of the required items was the ELA curriculum. And I see that as a very important tool for our teachers. I think we would not expect another town employee in another town department to get their own tools or supplies for their jobs online. And what I'm referencing is that our teachers are getting this curriculum online. We heard from the assistant superintendent before. We are not providing that to them. So they are using their own funds, and they're getting a curriculum that's different from class to class and grade to grade. So I fully support that curriculum program in the required budget. I don't know where we could, these line items were very tight, and I don't know where we could cut from another area in order to add those classroom teachers, which I think are critical and a must-have, especially since you've got classrooms of the same grade with class sizes of 5 fewer kids in other schools. Even the required assessment to Whitman is only, comes down to a 4% increase for the town of Whitman from their operating budget from last year. So I know that the Budget Override Evaluation Committee looked at this hard and did vote for a 5% increase. To get to that, for Whitman's assessment, it's $144,000 more on this required assessment. That would equal $96,000 more in the Hanson 60-40 split. So $240,000 added would add teachers. And yes, it would increase from this required assessment put forth by the superintendent. But it's what our students need, and our priority is for the students.
Fred?
With all due respect, I think that we all need to be cognizant of Hanson busting at the seams, so to speak.
Excuse me.
At the same time. I would want to defer to our professionals. You gave us a proposed budget that was required, and by no means am I trying to diminish what class size is and, you know, what were the best, so to speak. Is the proposed budget something that you feel comfortable with as the absolute minimum to work with, or do you see it as that it needs to be a little bit more? Or is it trying to just look at the crystal ball because you just don't know who's moving out, who's moving in, etc.? I don't know what the projections are.
I think the class size issue is not going away. I think that is a necessity. That's the next priority. The reason we supplemented technology in that is that I don't want to lose any more staff. Right now, very honestly, they're looking to go because they're overworked and things are failing. And that's our infrastructure. And if I lose a tech department, we're down. It doesn't matter how many teachers I have. We're going to be down. Our systems are down. That's how deficient we are institutionally. Our systems are failing. But yes, I would say those classroom teachers are a necessity. My hope, and I just spoke to a couple of community members, I'm hoping to see through the 5 or 6 retirements some savings. And if there's that $130,000 or $105,000 I get from the governor this summer, I'm able to bring back some of those things. I also, George and I talked about bumping into E&D for $100,000 to add teachers. We weren't going to use E&D to supplement the budget or offset the budget. So depending on where the budget laid out, again, budget proposal, nobody in either town is committed to funding the budget we're saying. But if both towns are able to fund the required piece, I feel 75% confident if I needed to dip into E&D with my retirements, I could probably fulfill those classroom teachers. That being said, I don't have a crystal ball to see where they are, but I would prioritize those teachers. Those classrooms are bulging. 28 students in a fourth grade class, 26 kids in a first grade class, and that's an inclusion class. So we have students with some specific disabilities as well. And again, my goal K to 3 is 19 to 22, and we're hitting that target. 5 years ago, we weren't hitting that target. We are hitting that target. If not for last year and the crunch that we had, we would be at that target. So trying to restore those are a priority. And between the two of us trying to prioritize our infrastructure versus classrooms, knowing that there's a potential that through retirement we could restructure some things, that's why we kept it, we put it in recommend. But I would fully support if this committee said we need to add those teachers to do that, and if through retirements we didn't need that piece of it, you know, I'm not sure what that looks like. And then not go to E&D. Or if I get more money from the governors to put more money and certify the FY20 budget so we grow our E&D. Years ago, as John said, we had $1 million in E&D. We were actually putting a lot away that we might have been able to use in the district budget. But we've used E&D to offset the budget every year or the budget assessment every year. And this year, we're not looking to do that. So that's the classroom teachers, bottom line, is a priority. That's an absolute. To give you a number, adding those, I think Dawn just mentioned something, John's trying to verify that as well. So just what that number would be.
Tech number, is that at, excuse me, is that at 80 or 150 for the restore? I have notes here, it's listed at the tech specialist. Was 80, but I have down 150 on the side.
150 was what we raised it as, because what's taking place in tech is that we're trying to get a tech person who's at a high level, who knows many different systems. And then the other piece of that is we're trying to make sure we can get a facilities which incorporates, an operations which incorporates facilities and technology, liaison or person who can handle all the tickets ingoing and outgoing, so we can then get a handle on the budget.
And that, you would be asking 150 for
Yes.
Yes.
And with additional to the 4 teacher for reduction of 280, that would come out to the 430K mark. So you would have to put another 430 on your required.
We had already put those
The
tech folks
150s in the
into.
required.
Tech folks were already in it.
Yeah,
Remember
In the proposed.
Yeah.
Okay.
December they weren't. They were in at the formal one, which was last
Which one was that?
month.
I'm working off
sometime.
an old sheet then.
Yeah, Dan, they got bumped up on a different copy, the 80 and the 70 for both of those. That's okay.
So are you prepared number-wise to tell us what that would be to lower these class sizes, or do you need the week?
To be really accurate, probably the week. We can give you an estimate, and as John had said, using the statutory, adding anything above that, so if it's $250,000, it's a simple 60-40 split to the assessment now.
I've just been hearing from the different town committee members that there's a real need for us to give them a number for them to work with. And obviously, time is very important to consider. So, and knowing now from John that it's not, dead set that we can't go up if we could negotiate something, or, that's good to know. So I think I'd like to see us move on a number.
Chris?
So I think we just have to be creative in how we do that. So, right, I think there's can we build some consensus and give an indicative number? Because from my point of view, I think that voting the actual budget becomes a little bit challenging because we still have that assessment thing. So again, I think we're all trying to work through this compromise. If there's a way to kind of say, this is kind of what we're thinking as a committee without necessarily going through the formal budget approval process, And then hopefully that gives the towns the opportunity to start to come together and see if there's some sort of compromise. That maybe gets us to where we need to go. So I just want to be careful on, or be creative on how we're maybe setting an indicative number rather than actually taking a formal budget approval vote. Does that make sense, Fred?
It makes sense, and unfortunately, like in my mind, I resolved myself to the situation being given what it is. It's a tread water, level services, get us through. And obviously there are some other things that come up that we have to be cognizant of. So if we can come up with a way to add the bare bones necessity of being able to fulfill an obligation or have a contingency in place to fulfill that, come up with a budget number that is going to be realistic that we could vote on, give to the towns, so at least they have the direction as well. I think we're going to be so close with everything anyways, because I don't think we're talking, it's not mega bucks.
So I mean, what we did was we gave you the operating assessment on the required budget on February 5th. If you want to run with, that's the initial of where you're at, and then adding 280 to that assessment would be a 60-40 split. But one of the things we just talked about, we did advertise this as a budget discussion. We didn't really say we were going to vote on a budget tonight. So I don't know if that's problematic. I'm just not sure of that legal piece.
The legal part, I think we said we were limiting it to the budget, which I would think would encompass a vote of the budget.
Yeah, I think we're fine with that. Chris, and
Yes, sorry.
then we're going to go to this.
So Fred, I'm in support of conceptually what you described. My challenge is actually voting on an approved budget. For me, is almost contingent upon actually understanding that there's going to be a compromise. So, right, because again, we're kind of back to the how do we? I'm trying to be careful because I don't want to go backwards because I think we're moving in the right direction.
That's
right?
The chicken and the egg.
Right, but I think
so
part of it
speak.
is, and maybe I don't know if we can do this, but there's hey, here's a general consensus number that we're thinking. It's not. It's just we're just saying as a group we're building a consensus number for indicative purposes. It's not a formal vote, right? We're just making an indicative.
It's a vote not to set the assessment, but to give a...
We're just saying here's a consensus number from the committee in terms of what we think. And that kind of gives the towns a view of are we going more of this is the required restore or not? For me, I'm not in a position where I can't vote on a budget.
I can appreciate what you're saying. I think they had that even last week, conceptually. But they're looking for it hard. At least that was...
I didn't get that impression in my conversations with them. I didn't get that. I got the impression that they're looking for us to establish something, give them something, is how it was said to me. And I think, Chris, I'd go along with that.
Makes a lot of sense.
Mr. Dugan.
Mike Dugan, 437 Gorwin Drive, Hanson. Just a question or clarification on the 280 additional teachers. Just because I don't know any better, if you added 4 teachers, are there 4 empty classrooms right now, or would there be an additional facilities cost, so that 280 might be 350?
No. So I'd break up the fourth grade class at Indian Head that's got 28 and drop that, because there's an empty classroom right now.
That had a teacher last year.
That had a teacher last year.
Yeah, now it's an empty space.
So there's no facility cost to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that would be the same?
At Duval, same thing.
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Can we ask if for clarification last week, if FinCom and Selectmen are here, if that's they want a ballpark number, or the actual setting of the budget?
Randy,
Just so everybody
did you hear
knows.
what Mr. Cullity just said? And I know you can't speak for the committee, but we're talking conceptual. We've got a lot of conversations going on here.
Randy Lamontina, Selectman, Town of Whitman. From what I know from our discussions with Hanson is Ms. Kemet seemed to me like she wanted a number. We're very close, and I think further negotiations kind of hinges on where you guys come in. I can't speak for her, I wish she was here, but I'm pretty sure she would echo something similar, that I think the fear is we come close and then that number keeps rising. So if it's there's a lot of trust going on here, if you can give us a ballpark and.
That's what we're kind of finding, we don't.
There's
I
trust
don't think
in
we
that.
want to get it set, but we know you need numbers to move on.
Whitman sits in a slightly different position than Hanson. Like Mr. Small said, and I know you're all aware, that we have to be very cognizant of where Hanson is. And every dollar above probably that level service is going to make things tougher for Hanson. It's going to stretch the negotiation process that we're going through. Unfortunately, we all know where the school district stands. We heard it tonight. We hear the needs. I understand it as well as everyone on this board. It could be the year that level service is actually a way of pushing the district forward. I know that's tough to say, but we're trying to get through a very difficult situation. I think we're working through it well, but it may not be the year to add things, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fred?
What are we looking at for retirements approximately?
Right now, for this year, I think we have 5. I have 5. I believe I have 5 or 6 coming out. I know I have 3 at Indian Head.
So if we talked 5 and roughly 30 be a safe number, 30,000?
Of savings?
Yeah.
Or of
Per.
Give or take, yeah.
So there's 150.
That's what I'm.
That's a
I'm-
text box.
So that's what I'm thinking in some spots like that as well, So roundabout, I mean, is what we did on the sheet. Your budget number is 55,017,938. That's the proposed budget right there. And we gave you that as an operating assessment on the last page of the budget presentation, what it would break down, non-mandated capital for HVAC and capital for the high school. So we would just add $280,000 to that total budget and then have that breakdown, 60/40, give or take.
What do we have? We've got 6 what in the E&D?
609, I think.
610,000 roughly.
610. And do we have any sort of guesstimate as to what we might be putting back in this year, or?
I think it'd be close to 0.
Can't touch it.
I'll be happy if
Very-
we get to 0.
Okay.
We're on thin ice with E&D.
To talk about what we're going to have to put back in E&D might be a danger zone,
Yeah, we're on thin ice now.
because it's been cut so badly that,
Because we've been covering.
now we're really playing crystal ball.
We've been paying the budget for a few years now with that and not getting revenue streams back like we were.
Exactly.
And we really can't be paying the budget with your rainy day fund. You have more sped children come in, you have an incident at a school, we're not gonna have money to cover it, and then
Yeah, but-
kiss your bond.
Yeah, but you can, how does it work? You can borrow for sped?
For outrageous costs, yes.
Yeah, if you have
Or
something,
unanticipated?
Unanticipated outrageous costs. They're not gonna cover $100,000, but if we had 3 move-ins at residential at $990,000, we could go to DESI and say, hey, look, we need some help here, we need some relief. One thing to clarify, since we've been here, we've never used E&D other than to balance the budget. So that's just a point. That's why I talked about, we've never used E&D, and I went back to Michelle, since Michelle's been here, other than to offset the district budget going into the assessments.
go ahead, Mr. Boyce.
May I make a motion to set the 2021 district budget at $55,297,938?
You change the language, not as to set, but projected. Can't set the budget tonight. we want to give them numbers, and then come back next week, and if we have fine tuning.
Projected numbers.
Yes.
So,
Might as well stay home and.
Well, it's something to give to.
well, I think, right.
I know, yeah, but I'd hate to say the word, you gotta set it at something, and then go from there where you can
It's almost like
change
we're
it.
trying to take a consensus vote. I don't know if we can do that.
I second that.
Go ahead, Mr. Small.
Is that a motion?
I mean, if we're looking at it, I'd like to conceptually take the 150 off, so to speak. You know, that we would utilize toward, you know, those additional teachers. I think 30,000 is safe, and I think 5 retirees, they put in their letters.
Well, that 150 we'll use for the IT if we need it. Well, we know we're gonna need it.
Well,
So we've
yeah,
already
but
got
the
that-
IT money's already in there.
That's already in there. That's already in there.
That's already in there.
Use it for the Bright
Teachers
program.
aren't.
Right.
And I'm just thinking, every penny's gonna matter to the folks in Susan.
Anyone else? She's been standing here very patiently.
Do you want to introduce myself
Yes,
again?
Dawn second.
I do, okay. Kara Moser, 41 Hammond Road in Hanson. I just want to loop back to what Randy said, and I want to be very respectful of the efforts that he and Laura Kemet in Hanson are making to come to some consensus and resolution and compromise, because I think that that is the only way that we can move forward. We need to be a community here, so I appreciate that very much so, and I think that this is a year where we probably all are going to have to kind of compromise to get where we need to be. I do just want to say, and I appreciate, Chris, too, what you were saying about accounting in some way for potentially these classroom teacher positions. I just, for what it's worth, more speaking to the finance committees, the boards of selectmen, and especially the community members of Whitman-Hanson. I'm going to say, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, and I'll continue to say it, that my oldest will be going to high school next year. She's no longer in district because of our budget situations. I've chosen to move her out of district. I have 2 others that I would very much like to keep in district. The class sizes are the tip of the iceberg since my oldest has been in kindergarten about the erosion of services through these towns when I was in Whitman and when I was in Hanson, that these kids, because we haven't been funding the budget. So we come in with level services. It's not ideal, it's not great, but I just implore the people of both communities to please not erode the level services any further than they've already been eroded. It's a disgrace, and it's my children's entire educational experience. They will not get a do-over on that, and I have heard parents say that again and again, and I just really hope that the communities are listening to that. So for what it's worth, I appreciate anything you can do for class sizes next year from a classroom perspective, but there's library services, there's music services, there's foreign language, there's just so much that they haven't had opportunities for, or they've lost and gotten back, or they've lost and never gotten back. So it's just, I feel very, very strongly about that, and I really hope the communities can come together and support that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a motion for $55,297,938. Am I correct, Mr. Boyce?
Yes.
What was the full motion? What was the motion specifically?
I motion to set the budget at that.
At $55,297,938. $297,938. That is the motion, and it has been seconded. Correct, Michelle?
Yes.
You have a second?
I have Ms. Byers as second.
Yes.
Discussion, any further discussion on this? Chris?
So, just so we're clear before we vote this, I would absolutely be in favor of working with this required budget with the understanding that the towns come to compromise. So regardless of the vote tonight, I just want to be clear on that. So I think there has to be a required compromise embedded within that in terms of my view of supporting that.
We can do that.
You can't do that.
I'm just telling you so that you understand when I make my vote, what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Small.
I would like to make a motion to amend the projected amount to $55,147,938, basically $150,000 less, seeing that we have teachers' letters and those anticipated savings, I think are reasonable and comfortable, just to try and keep everything whittled down as much as possible. And also with the, at least from my perspective, the understanding that any way that we can find to save $1, even if it's bringing our own water, if we can agree to that, you know, we'll do that and we'll work the budget by those amounts as well.
An amendment, somebody want to second it?
What was the amount?
Mr. Boyce is second.
$55,147,938.
Discussion. $55,147,938. It's $150,000 less than what Mr. Boyce made the motion, and we had a second on it. Mr. Boyce just seconded that as the amendment. Is there it, Jeff?
Can I just say that doesn't guarantee anything, that adds.
Conceptually, that doesn't guarantee that there might be.
That'll guarantee a couple of
class size
spots.
added.
That'll guarantee a couple of spots. It'll guarantee.
55,147?
Yeah, that'll guarantee, if Fred's counting on 150 back, this number here out of the 280 is 130. That's going to guarantee at least 2.5 teachers, but we can't put a half teacher in a class. So when I look at that, I average, I'm looking at that 280 at $65,000, but that's not including any benefits. That's just a teacher salary depending on where they come in. So that's why doing that's why we look at a 280 as a good number to replace those folks. I don't know what I'm going to be able to hire a teacher at, even with my retirements. My retirees go out at 82, 85, sometimes maybe it might be 90. So I'm not sure what I'm going to get back. I understand what you say, that might be a savings, but my argument, or my counter to that is, if we had that additional savings, I'd add the Bright programs at both Whitman Middle and Hanson Middle School. That would offset the cost of the social emotional pieces of kids going out. So I would look at reusing that money again if we had that savings to add services, or like Ms. Moser said, add something for our kids that we've cut in the past. So it's not found money, so to speak, if we were to get this 280 in the budget and then I had a cost savings. That would be reacclimated or reinvested in something in technology, something that we've already cut in the past. That's why I don't count necessarily on retirements.
Mr. Jones?
Yeah, I totally agree with the amount that Fred's saying, but at this point, I can't vote without knowing what the agreement is gonna be to the two towns. I can't vote an affirmative on that until we figure out what they're gonna go back and forth on.
I have a question on that, too.
I don't see a need at this point to vote anything other than to give the towns, our best guess of what we need, and let them continue their, to this point, very positive and encouraging negotiations.
But it was motion to set.
That's what
they're trying to explain is,
yes,
they don't feel comfortable setting a budget until they know. That's why I was saying originally, when Steve, trying to say, let's not use the word set. Let's use another pot of language to present the towns with a preliminary fixated number or something, whatever they want to call it, as long as we're not saying setting.
Wait a minute, Ally, Dawn was next, and then.
I'm unsure and confused over what you expect to see come out of negotiations. I heard Mr. LaMattina say we're very close. I'm not privy to these conversations. I don't know what they're getting at. I don't believe it's going to be a negotiated regional agreement. So if someone can help me out here to understand what you're expecting to hear from, I don't know. I'm confused.
There's financial talks going back and forth between the two selectmen that we're hearing. We don't know what they are, but they need a number. Here's the number. But
Right, I just want to focus on our priorities as a school committee in setting our budget, and I don't know what, I don't know what towns, and what they're negotiating, is this on our behalf or not on our behalf, and so forth, so.
I have Ally, then you, Fred.
would it make more sense to amend the budget, to amend the motion to say, we would like to set a projected budget and not set the budget?
Okay, but we're running, I'd rather see some withdrawals made so this is cleaner than having
You
all
can't,
kinds
you
of.
can't make it, we already got an amendment
Right.
on the table.
So,
Right.
Do you want
We'd have to
to
back
withdraw
up.
your amendment? And I'll
Mr.
withdraw
Small, then,
I'm going
mine.
to speak for the sake of discussion, now I'll be glad to withdraw. But I think what we get from the towns is a matter of what they can afford. We could set the assessment or the budget at what we really need, and that would be probably somewhere around $70 million for what we really need, was 65 million, somewhere in that range.
Close to 60.
But if they can't pay the bill, it doesn't matter whatever we set the budget for. And I think that's what they're discussing, is what they're going to, what type of bill they're going to be able to pay. And if we all work together, you know, it starts with what is our absolute necessities. That's what they need out of us, and that's what I want to try and provide. It's horrible. It's not the right way to be able to do things, but that's what this budget season presents us once again.
wait a minute, Dan. Chris?
Yeah, I'm not privy to the discussions either, and I think the nature of what we're going through, it's on them to have those discussions, and I'm sure they're, you know, I just think this is where we are, and this is what we need to do to move forward, and just from the,
Leave $1.
yeah, just from what I've been hearing, and as Randy just said, they're close, and that's a heck of a lot better than where we were a few months ago. And I understand that, you know, there are certain things that we'd like to see done to improve the district, but I think someone said it earlier, maybe it's best if we get through, over this hurdle, this very, you know, challenging time, get through this together, and come together, you know, possibly next year, and talk about adding so many of these services that we think we need. And there is trust involved in that, but it's also on us to advocate for what the district needs. And if we have the time to do that, I think we could do it effectively. And I guess that's my personal stance.
Dan,
Yeah.
then Fred.
I'm
sorry.
I just want to point out, correct me if I'm wrong, we can't, you can try to pass this, but you need 7 votes for us to set an assessment. There's
To set a
only
budget.
6 To set a budget.
Budget.
Budget, sorry. There's only 6 people from Whitman, and if Hanson doesn't want to do it, you're not setting anything tonight. That's why I said you can't set it. You have to give them members, let them do it for another week of whatever they have to do for the negotiations. No matter what, next week, we have to come up with a budget. Well, then we start down that very bad trail of, you know, we're not going to get anything this year. But they need something to play with so they can keep negotiation, because, you know, the town of Hanson isn't going to be a big swing like we're dropping on them. That's why they're negotiating, to come up with a compromise so that they can make their payments. If we just go in there full out and say, boom, we're not going to get anything set, we're not going to get a budget. That's why they want to do the back way, let them try to figure out what they can do. Then they'll be more than happy to work on the budget and move it forward. Kind of like at a standstill here, and if that's what they need to get over the hump, you know, we need 1 vote from them to get a budget set, basically now. We know what we want to do. That's all they're asking is put a number on the table so that Randy and his counterparts and FinComs all know what's going on, so they can kind of like move everything forward so we know it's going to work for us. I mean, that's the best we can do right now, is just throw up a temporary number.
Yep.
Give it to them. You know, if we won't be set if we don't do it. We need 7 votes to get a budget set right now.
Thank you.
Given the chair to tell me their pleasure, either a removal of my motion to amend or rewording of my motion to amend to, instead of set the budget, set a proposed budget.
You can't change you can
I
change
can't.
the number in an
But I
amendment.
can't change.
You'd have to
the
do
word.
it.
So if you
You have to do it.
withdraw,
I'll withdraw my motion.
You're going to
and
withdraw
I'll
your
withdraw
second?
mine. But I-
Okay, the amendment is now off the table. You want to withdraw your first number?
Yeah, but I wasn't going to go, I did second Fred's argument, I wasn't going to go as low as the 147. You know, we put George and John and Jeff into enough of a hassle. I would still stick with the 55,297,938. But I'm happy to withdraw my motion to set the budget. Happy to do that.
And the second was, who was the second, Michelle?
Dawn. Dawn Byers?
Don?
Don.
Would you withdraw your second, please? He's going to withdraw his motion.
Yes? Okay, so I have to withdraw my second first?
No hearing.
No,
He did, he withdrew.
we just, oh yeah, I guess.
You,
Okay, so we're back to
Nothing.
zero.
okay.
It's kind of, I understand what Dan's saying, and I understand what Chris is saying, I get what Fred's saying, I get what everybody is basically saying, what Chris Scriven said. That's kind of why in the beginning I said, we've got a week. We've got to do it within 7 days. We threw this meeting together quickly to get the exact numbers and go line, excuse me, line by line with the budget to see where we were going to be. Having heard what everyone has said tonight, we have a week. Conceptually, anyone that listened to this meeting knows that we're either at 55,297,938 or 55,147,938 as two benchmark numbers that are on the table that haven't been voted on, but have been discussed to give some sort of a direction. Ally?
So do we need to take a vote to set a temporary budget, or we're just good saying these are the numbers we're talking?
If you vote anything, you're stuck with it.
Can't you just have a consensus not to exceed 55,297,938 and see what happens?
And then you just say yes, it's not a vote, it's just the consensus of the committee.
I'm just trying to go to
Conceptually, you're
bed.
talking about
Consensus
Trying to
a
get
consensus?
of the committee, not to exceed.
Mr. Lamartine is back.
We got the consensus. Is there any possible way that you could run these numbers for us like you did with the required budget the first time and get this out to Mr. Lynham and
Yes.
Mr. Stanbrook? I think that would be critical, where each town knows where they sit based on one of these numbers.
Yeah.
I think we
Would
got
you be comfortable with both numbers?
I'm comfortable with you.
So
having it.
you've gotten what you've needed, hopefully,
What we
from this
need.
conversation?
I think with that information.
Yeah.
That would be helpful, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we can do
Yes.
that for you.
Great.
Get it done.
Things can probably progress from there.
Will that help you?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Randy, it'll be Friday, okay? John's out tomorrow. Thank you.
Put that over on
These two,
Okay,
we already have the first.
has everybody, go ahead.
Just, I don't know, another thought. These aren't easy conversations, these aren't easy, considerations and whatnot, but I think that the sensitivity that we've shown to this point is helpful to get us past where we're held up on this, and I think it's important to remember that. It's a compromise, it's a negotiation, no one's gonna come out feeling like they got everything they want. That's the nature of this, process. And I think I just appreciate the committee members' sensitivity to what we're going through.
Thanks.
Any further discussion about the budget before I entertain a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
The boys.